Welcome everyone to another Get Answers session. This is Henry Lusengore, your host for this session. This morning we're talking about carbon footprints with Karen Marshall. I have to say to start with that Charles Morgan was going to be hosting, but unfortunately broadband issues means he can't. We're hoping he's going to be able to ask some questions later, but I'm going to be standing in, so I hope that's okay. I'd like to welcome Karen Marshall, who is a science teacher and has been working with her students to look at carbon footprints and reducing them, and also she herself has a 50% below average carbon footprint, I am told. Welcome, Karen. Great to have you on. I'd like to now hand over to you to present your
Hello, and thank you very much, Henry. So today I'm giving you a short talk, really to give you a bit of a flavour of the science behind climate change, what a carbon footprint is, and indeed how to measure and lower your carbon footprint. So a little bit of science first of all. What is the greenhouse effect? Well, our planet is surrounded by layers of different gases, which we call the atmosphere. And some of these gases will absorb the reflected infrared radiation from the Earth. And this has the effect of warming up the atmosphere. It's a natural effect and is needed for us to be able to live on this planet. We only have to look at our nearest neighbours to understand just how important the greenhouse effect is. For example, Venus has 96% carbon dioxide, surface temperature 400 degrees Celsius. On the other hand, Mars has no atmosphere, where the average temperature there is minus 60. So let's just give you a bit of historical data here. You can see here, this is the Earth, the amount of carbon dioxide over time in the Earth's history. And certainly there were huge fluctuations at the beginning of this planet's life. But you can see in the second half of the graph how the levels stabilized in the atmosphere. And this is when the carbon cycle set up. The amount of carbon going in was equal to the amount of carbon going out. Well, fluctuations in the gases took place over millions of years. And on this planet, the flora and fauna were able to adapt. But now have a look at this. This is in the last 800,000 years. And you can see that the levels of carbon dioxide have never been above 300 parts per million, except in the last 50 years in modern time. And this increase, this massive increase to 400 parts per million is due to human activity. And this runaway or out of control runaway greenhouse effect is what we call global warming. Now, there is no doubt, and we have plenty of science data to show that indeed our planet is warming, and we are about 1.2 degrees Celsius above the average temperatures in the past. And a man called Ed Hawkins from the University of Reading changed this temperature graph into colours to represent how far above or below the average the mean land and ocean temperatures are, and he called these the climate stripes. If you're interested to see the warming in the area where you live, have a look at the website showyourstripes.com and it'll give you your individual country. So climate. Well, climate is the average weather over a number of years. It could be 10, 20, 50 or even 100 years. And we have increased temperatures above the average. This is causing the polar ice to melt and sea levels to rise. And this is threatening to eliminate some island nations. The extra energy in our atmosphere is providing extremes of violent weather. We've had intense wildfires. We've burnt down whole towns in many different countries. And flooding and droughts have also taken many lives and livelihoods. And we as a species are really not helping by cutting down our rainforests, which are the lungs of the earth. There is no doubt that our climate is changing. And in order to try and stop this turning into a catastrophe for life on Earth, we really need to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that we're putting into the atmosphere. And this is just a bit of historical interest. You can see here in 1800, the UK, in sort of dark orange, was one of the main countries that was emitting carbon dioxide. And this was because it was the start of the Industrial Revolution, where we were using coal in order to build prosperity in our economy. Leap forward to 2019, you can see who the big emitters are today. We've got the US, Canada, Russia, we've got the Middle East countries, we've got Australia. Britain, well, good for you, the UK, you are going down in the amount of emissions that you have, and the government are legislating in order to push it down further. On the orange category, we've got developing countries. The example here I've given is India and Pakistan. They are developing economies, and as their economies develop, unfortunately, it has been built on coal, so their emissions are rising. And then the red group, the big emitters, Australia, Russia. Australia is built on a bed of coal. Russia provides Europe with gas, United States, China. And in fact, if you look at the absolute emissions, China is indeed got the top spot in terms of building their economy on coal and therefore having huge emissions. But what can we do about it? Let's talk about your carbon footprint. So what is a carbon footprint? Well, basically the amount of carbon dioxide and methane that you, as a consequence of your lifestyle and your organisation, release into the atmosphere simply by you going about your normal daily routines is called your carbon footprint. And if you can understand what you are doing to contribute carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, then you can do something about it and start to lower it. So I'm going to divide into 4 sections: transport, waste, food and energy. And I've got a few people here to help me with this. So we're going to start off with Pip, who's going to tell us how to start to measure food waste.
We have to weigh our food waste. So it's a bit hard to just weigh the food waste on the scale, so we're going to do it by measuring myself and then finding out what the difference is. So me with the food waste is 70, and so that would mean if you subtract mine, there is 10 kilograms of food waste in this bag.
And thank you, Pip. And we're going to go over now to Sophie, who has a solution as to what to do with the waste.
I'm over here at the wormery, in which we have tiger worms. Now we put in raw food waste, and we also have pig waste on the top to keep them warm, as the worms turn the waste into compost.
And thank you very much, Sophie. So summarising those two, we really need to cut down on food waste. Food waste gives out an awful lot of methane if it's allowed to decompose. So some ideas: only cook what you want to eat. Only buy enough for what you want to eat. And if you're cooking for lots of people and you're not quite sure about quantities, put what you need on a plate and then multiply it by the number of people you've got. I would recommend Olio app if it's in your area, which is a food sharing app, allowing the food to get to from where people have excess to where people need it. And you might consider composting worms. You don't have to have a big outdoor space, and they don't smell. They can even be inside. We use tiger worms. Robin now is going to talk about transport.
I am in our school bike sheds. A lot of carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere as a result of driving petrol and diesel fueled cars and vehicles. So in order to cut down on this, you can ride bikes or walk. So here we have lots of ordinary bikes, and we also have electric bikes as well.
Thank you, Robin. So we need to cut down on the vehicles that use petrol and diesel. So it's very easy to, can you walk? It's easy to walk if you can, even if you can simply choose to walk or cycle on 1 day a week, 1 day a fortnight. It can really make a difference. Electric bikes are lovely, but they're very expensive. But in many, many areas now, you can have a scheme where you can hire electric bikes just for certain journeys that you want to do. And be proud to do that. If you can do that, for every mile you walk, it will save an average of 400 grams of carbon dioxide going into our atmosphere. Sophie, Ria and Lauren are now going to talk about energy.
Thank you, Dr. Marshall. We are in an empty meeting room with the lights on. We've gathered that the biggest contribution to CO2 is from fossil fuel, power stations, coal, gas and oil. This meeting room can be walked into with its lights on. We can reduce the carbon footprint easily by simply turning off the lights.
We also walked into the meeting room and realised the heating's on while the windows are still open. Another useful tip to reduce your carbon footprint is turning down the heating before opening the window. It's a waste of energy. Doing this will also save you lots of money over time.
Thank you, girls. So the previous hint was to get healthy. This one saves you money, can save you several £100s or more a year. Switch off lights when you leave a room. Turn the heating down rather than opening a window. Turn off vampire devices that suck up energy even though you've turned them off. You might even like to turn your heating down by 1 degree and maybe put a cardi on if you're feeling cold. Just one thing though, in terms of opening the windows when the heating's on, at the moment, because we're in COVID restrictions, that's something that we might not be able to avoid for now. So let's talk about how you do that. If you would like to Google carbon calculator, you'll come up with several. This is one of the best, and it leads you through exactly what you need to measure, and then it will convert all those measurements, all that data, into kilograms or tons of carbon dioxide. You can see here, these are a couple of sheets on there, takes you through energy, and you can have a look at kilowatt hours. You might be able to take energy readings from a meter or ask your energy company what these numbers are that you need. Here's some other ideas, motor vehicles, telephone, everything can be converted into tons of carbon dioxide. This is another one that's particularly good. This is a World Wildlife Fund, and this one actually shows you that in the developed world, and this is the UK average, is nearly twice that of the world average in terms of our carbon footprint. So we really can make a difference if we can find a way to lower it. So very quickly, we're coming to the end of this little talk now, just to let you know some of the jargon that's being used now. Carbon neutral, that explains how the carbon emissions that you're giving out, you get to equal carbon taken in. For example, planting trees counts as carbon taking in, but offset is allowed if you're going to go carbon neutral. What is offset? Offset is paying someone else to lower their carbon emissions and then counting them in your numbers. So not the greatest one. Net zero is better because, again, carbon in equals carbon out, but no offset is allowed. So it will force you to change your lifestyle in order to reduce your emissions. And carbon zero is a gold standard, but very hard to do in today's modern developed society, because that's giving out no carbon at all. So another hint for you, if you Google sustainable swaps or sustainable hacks, you can get lots and lots of websites. This is a particularly good one, and it gives you lots and lots of ideas about what you can do. And this is really nice because these swaps are easy to do and it's no big deal. And by just swapping something, you can really make a difference. And so it's well worth having a look at sustainable swaps where you don't necessarily have to change your lifestyle hugely. So I'm coming to the end of my talk now. So everything I've mentioned here today and we've mentioned is something that you as an individual can do, and it will make a difference. COP26 was a vehicle for countries of the world to legislate in order to truly make a difference, to keep our future temperatures rises to 1.5 degrees C. I'm not sure what they've actually agreed will help us do that. And to be honest, we can't sit around and wait for the leaders to make those decisions. We really need to take action ourselves. So really, every little thing helps. If everyone in your family, your school, your organisation, your city, your country took steps to lower their carbon footprint, then you can all make a huge difference. Whoever you are, be a change maker. Find the carbon footprint of your life. Use the data to decide on the changes that are kind to the planet.
Thanks very much, Karen. That's a great opening introduction to climate change and carbon footprints. Now, I've got Charles has managed to join us, but I'm not sure if we can hear him. Charles? No, he doesn't seem to be managing that. I'll have to move him out. Now, we're now interested in questions from viewers. And Charles, even though you can't make it into the studio, hopefully you can ask some questions on YouTube, which we can give to Karen. I'd like to start with one question, which is a sort of challenging one, because one of the things that's come out recently, when in examination of what fossil fuel companies have been up to over the last few decades, is that they actually invented the idea of a carbon footprint to move the responsibility for action off them onto individuals. What do you think about that?
Oh, that is an interesting question. I hadn't heard that they'd done that. Well, do you know what? Even if that was the origin of a carbon footprint, it's by gathering data like this, it enables us to all change our lifestyles in order to lower our impact on the planet. So, do you know what? I'm not too worried if that's the origin, because if some good can come out of it, and I do believe, as well as governments legislating, we all ourselves can make a difference. And so I'm not too worried about the origin of it, if it's going to enable us as individuals to make a difference.
But I suppose there's a limit on what we can do, aren't we? If the fossil fuel companies are still dominating the energy system and refusing to take action and using this as diversionary tactics.
Well, maybe we can turn it on the energy companies themselves and actually people power. We have a lot of power in consumerism. We have a lot of power in what we buy. So if we decide not to buy the products which are high in carbon emissions, and then the companies then no longer make a profit, that's one way that we as individuals can make a difference.
I suppose that's depends on information, not on our carbon footprints, but on the products, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. But if we can find alternatives, and I have to say, the growing awareness now of this, due to COP26 and as well as all the weather that's been happening, people are much more aware, and I think they're therefore got the information to start making those choices. And so if we can move forward and start making choices that eliminate the products that are high in carbon dioxide and find alternatives, then I think we're starting to make a difference.
And do your pupils go on strike on Fridays? Do you encourage them to do that?
Not every Friday. If you bring Robin in, she can tell you. Robin went on the climate strike.
Well, we're getting a bit of background. That's better. Now, Karen, I think I'm going to actually take you out of it, because I think that's where the reverberation's coming from. Hi, Robin. Welcome.
Hiya. Well, you need to.
Oh dear, I think you're also reverberating, so I don't know what's happening there. Sophie, I believe you're at home because you're COVID positive. Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct.
How are you feeling?
Not too bad, actually. Feeling better.
What do you reckon about the climate strikes? Do you think that's also part of, as well as what you need to do, as well as reducing your footprint?
I think they're very good at raising awareness. So me and Robin went to one the other weekend where they gave some talks. It's very good on a local level, just being able to speak to people and politicians and get our views out there. But in regards of actually bringing about change, you don't really do anything. It's more a lot of us standing around talking about what we'd like to be done, but a lot less action. That could especially be seen after the one a few years back. Nothing really happened after it, but lots of like promises were made. So it's very interesting in that regard. But I do still think they're important just to get out there and get involved.
And in terms of your work looking at carbon footprints and encouraging people to change their behaviour, how do you get that message out there?
We talk about it a lot in assemblies at school and through social media. And then we've spoken to people, so then younger years, they've been really involved with it. So it's kind of had a domino effect.
And have you been monitoring the overall impact, say, of the school or pupils in it? Can you see what's happening as a result?
We haven't really got there yet, but we're trying to more work on how we can lower ours. But we do have obviously the knowledge of what a heightened carbon footprint can do. We just need to, I think, probably get slightly more information to be able to see our knock-on effect just as a school.
So I think, for instance, presumably you could see how many people cycle to school as opposed to
driving to school. We've done a lot of travel surveys. We can see all of these things, which is how we're combating it. So for travel, we had an initiative run by the PE department for people to cycle in instead of drive. And it was interesting to see the changes over lockdown. So we can see what we're measuring. It's very interesting.
And what did you conclude? Was there quite an impact of raising awareness on people cycling rather than driving?
Yeah, the amount of people cycling definitely increased. I don't know whether that was to do with lockdown, when we came back to school, people realizing it's easier, or whether it was they were like, hang on, we need to make a change. But there definitely has been some impact. People are redoing the footprint now, some of the younger girls. So it'll be really interesting to see what their results show when compared to ours from a couple of years ago.
Brilliant. What about food? Because that's really interesting, isn't it? Because have you tracked where your food comes from, where it's grown, who processes it?
No, because we have our suppliers, so we have the core, but a lot of people bring in their own food. So that would be something we'd need to take a step further to look at, which would actually be a very good thing to see.
So I wonder what the local food production is on your island. You might explain where you live.
Oh yeah, so we live in Guernsey. I feel like a lot of it, I'm not well educated on this subject, but it is a lot of locally grown or bought in from the UK. But most people do shop at the big shops like Waitrose and stuff. So we're not the best when it comes to being all local, but we are quite good.
Have you started growing things in the school grounds or anything?
We do have a little patch. I think Karen said that she wants to answer this one. I don't know whether you could bring her in. I think they've moved to some different rooms.
Okay, let's bring in Karen. You're on mute.
Right. So there are plans to put planters in. We're in the middle of a town, so we don't have much ground, but we're going to aim to grow some food in planters. And if we're successful at that, some of it can go to our canteen to be cooked. We've got our worms, which will then chomp at our food waste, and we've also got a compost heap. So we are looking to bring that on stream in the next year. So yes. That's
brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Sophie. I'm just going to put you out again because we've just got a question for Karen here. Let me just bring that in from Sabana. Thank you very much, Sabana. So what about organizational carbon footprints?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because you can make a lot more of a difference if you can have organizations changing their rules and taking action for all their employees in order to lower your carbon footprint. So how we approach that, we're doing two things. We are working with the co-op. The girls are doing a little project with the co-op to have a look at their carbon footprint. And I have to say, in approaching companies, a lot of people are very receptive to the idea of doing it. And as a scientist, I think it's really important to gather data first of all. And once you've gathered the data, you can have a look at that and see what really makes the difference. I mean, it might be whatever company you're in, it's kind of obvious, and you don't really need to do the data gathering to know that what you can do. But go and have a conversation with the people in charge of your organization, explain what you want to do, and bring with you the views of the people who work there and say, we all want to do that, and then go from there. So have that conversation, I think, is my advice.
Does your school have a plan to reduce its overall organizational carbon footprint?
Yes, it does. And that's a direct result of us finding data about our carbon footprint. We presented that to the people who run the school, and they were very interested. We actually came up with some ideas how to save money as well. So I guess they were also interested in that. And maybe that's another way in, because a lot of the things you can do save money. So that could be another conversation with the people in charge of your organisation. If you point that out, they may well be interested in pursuing change.
What was the biggest part of the carbon footprint of the school?
For us, I'm afraid it's transport. So we may only live on an island that's 12 miles wide and 5 miles across, but consistently we've done travel surveys over the last 3 years now, and consistently we're at about sort of 2/3 to 3/4 of our school population driving in, which is far too high. So we are making inroads, as Sophie said earlier, and slowly chipping away at it. But that's our main contribution as a school. So,
and have you sort of investigated why people drive and why people are unwilling to cycle?
We have. Interestingly, we got that number down a little bit in lockdown because we basically wouldn't let them bring in bags and things. And a lot of the girls will say, oh, our bags are too heavy, basically. We have to bring everything in. Oh, it's convenient. Oh, I can't get here on time otherwise. So there are lots of excuses, and it's really just not giving up, not being disheartened, and keep going to persuade people to change their behavior. And I have to say, if you're going to start on this route, that's the hardest thing to do, is behavioral change. But it's really important to keep going.
And have you tried to suggest, that it's good exercise? Or I mean, actually, I used to, when I lived in London, cycle in, commute in about half an hour. And of course, I had a bag on the back of my bike, because actually, of course, carrying a big bag on your back when you cycle is not a good idea. But once you have a bag attached to your bike, you can put a huge amount of stuff into it, can't you? And it's not, you hardly notice.
You can, and you can also reassess what you're carrying backwards and forwards as well. And that's what lockdown made us all do, reassess what we were carrying backwards and forwards. But then I think the effect of lockdown, because we're out of lockdown now, is kind of diminished a bit. So we've got to keep going.
Brilliant. And so travel's been a big one. What other areas have you got significant change in, or are pushing for change?
So this year, it's food waste. We have measured all the food waste. So over 3 days, our canteen had 110 kilograms of food waste. So we're going to be looking at that, and everyone's on board with that. The catering manager is very happy to join us, because of course, if we can reduce food waste, we are saving money as well. So that's our next target for this year.
Brilliant. I'm going to see if I can bring in Robin. Hello, yeah. Robin. I can't actually see you. I'm just seeing if can you
hang on,
I've moved now.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Robin. I just was keen to sort of hear about your experience. Maybe you could turn just to look at the light out the window, and then we'll see your face. Can you do that?
Is that better? Like here? Oh, there.
That's great. So what was your experience of strikes on Fridays as opposed to taking action to lower your carbon footprint of the school? Which makes you feel, what feels most worthwhile?
Well, I'd say because our experience at school is mostly very sort of pro-fix climate change. So obviously spending time at school learning about what we need to do is very worthwhile. I know that I've made lots of changes to my own personal life, especially surrounding school, in order
Like
to make
what particular changes have you made?
So I think as of maybe 2 years ago, I started cycling to school pretty much every day, which has had massive health differences as well as lowering my own carbon footprint.
How far do you cycle?
Well, it varies from week to week. Sometimes it's just sort of 10 minutes, basically straight up a hill. And recently it's been sort of a half-hour cycle. Yeah.
So that's a bit more, isn't it? So after 2 years, you've done all this. So how's that? I mean, when you read all about the climate crisis, do you feel less in despair? Do you think it helps you feel more positive that things can change?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely more optimistic than I was, especially seeing other people's attitudes change well as my own is really encouraging. So, yeah, I think, and also because I'm more conscious of it, so I can sort of notice more when other people change their own habits. And I've noticed an increase in that, I think, especially with more media coverage of climate change and things like that. So I am optimistic.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Robin. We need to come to an end now, so I'll just bring Karen. Oh no, Karen's not there. So I'll probably now say goodbye and thank you very much. We'll put some links on the YouTube video that Karen suggested. I'd like to thank Karen, Robin, and Sophie. This has been really useful to hear from people who are trying to make a difference on the ground in their school, which I think is a key place for action. And look forward to seeing you at future events.